But what we found is when we turned on that gyroscope, we found that we were picking up a drift, a 15-degree-per-hour drift.
Thanks, Bob.
If you've spent any amount of time watching Simon Dan or MC Toon or FTFE, you're probably familiar with some version of that clip. But who is Bob, and why are we thanking him, and what is this 15-degree-per-hour drift? Those are all things that I was wondering myself when I started watching Flat Earth debunking content. It turns out Bob Knodel was a member of the Globebusters Flat Earth faction, one of the many teams out there dedicated to proving that the Earth is flat. Now, this little expose won't be nearly as vicious as the one about Cheswick, because Bob Knodel was actually not a particularly slimy or dishonest or mean-spirited flat earther. In fact, he was an engineer and an Air Force veteran who just for some reason still seemed to think that the Earth was flat. Now, he actually did good science. As we'll get into, he kind of turned up his nose at the results when they didn't say what he wanted them to. But the man knew more about how to conduct an experiment than the average layman would. Bob Knodel starred in a documentary about flat earthers called Behind the Curve, in which he bought a fiber optic or ring laser gyroscope for thousands of dollars. Now, a ring laser gyroscope, or I believe fiber optic gyroscope is the proper name for it, but it's a very precise measurement that can measure the drift of the Earth. Now, the Earth actually rotates at 15 degrees per hour. And he said at the beginning of his segment of the documentary, if it shows a 15-degree-per-hour drift, then that means the Earth rotates. If it shows anything else, the Earth does not rotate. Now, after spending all of this money that he collected from other flat earthers on this fancy gyroscope, he got a result of a 15-degree-per-hour drift. So the famous 15-degree-per-hour drift "Thanks Bob" meme was just him reading off the results of his scientific experiment. It shows a diagram down there, the thing with the little triangle of lasers. That was the fiber optic gyroscope. Now, Bob of course went on to say that he didn't agree with these results and there must have been some confounding variables. He said that it was something about heaven energies rotating. Obviously, he was just coping at that point, but he went on to say that he was trying to repeat the experiment with the gyroscope encased in bismuth, and that this would somehow block everything out. As far as I know, that never happened. But then on the same documentary, his colleague, Jeranism, did his own experiment and accidentally proved that the Earth curved. Now, Jeranism's experiment it involved two planks of wood, like tall planks of wood with holes in them, across a long distance, and he had a camera with a fancy zoom, probably the P900. Flat Earthers love the P900. He had that camera at one end, zooming in, and he had his friend like a long ways away on the other side of these two pieces of wood with the holes drilled in them, and he had him hold up a light, and if the light appeared at a certain height behind these two pieces of wood, then that meant there was no curvature, but if he had to lift it up higher, that meant there was curvature. And it turned out there was curvature. Jeranism actually went into full damage control mode about that. He said that the hypothesis was wrong to begin with. He never really elaborated, and he never repeated the experiment. Now, unfortunately for Bob Knodel, he never will be able to repeat his experiment. Bob Knodel died earlier this year in 2023 for reasons that have not been released to the public. So that's another reason why this wasn't such a hit piece like the one on Cheswick was. But mostly, Bob Knodel wasn't a terrible guy. He was a guy who had all the makings of someone intelligent, but just chose to believe the Earth is flat, and it was likely his ego was what led him to hold on to that. Anyway, that is the story behind the 15-degree-per-hour drift meme, and why we all say, thanks, Bob.
Delivery